This is Horror Stories.
Night Watchmen Tales.
Story 1. My name is Daniel, and for years, I was the night watchman at an abandoned apartment building on the outskirts of the city. The building, known as El Alderan, was an imposing structure that stood beside a dark and dense forest. For decades, it had been a home to prosperous families and successful businessmen, but at some point, it fell into a state of decay. Now, with its broken windows and its hallways filled with debris, it was a refuge for vagrants and lost souls. Management had warned me about the occasional presence of homeless people who ventured into the building, but they had never prepared me for what was about to happen. My shift started every night at 11 p.m. It was a monotonous routine. I walked the hallways with my flashlight in one hand and my walkie-talkie in the other, making sure there were no intruders and that the building wasn't in danger of fire. The first few months were quiet, but over time, I began to notice strange things. One night, as I was patrolling the second floor, I heard a strange noise. As usual, my flashlight was on, and I moved slowly through the dark corridors. The sound seemed to be coming from one of the rooms, where broken glass let in the nighttime breeze. As I approached, I saw the figure of a man sitting on the floor, surrounded by objects that seemed to have been scavenged from the trash, and I emphasize seemed. Maybe I should have paid more attention. His appearance was unkempt and disheveled. He wore torn and dirty clothes, and his beard was grown and tangled. But what struck me the most was his lost and crazed look. When I shone my flashlight on him, the vagrant turned to me, and his eyes, which gleamed with a strange light, met mine. There was something deeply unsettling about his gaze, as if he carried with him dark and disturbing secrets. Without saying a word, the vagrant began to mutter incoherent phrases. It was a delirious speech that made no sense, and his trembling voice sent shivers down my spine. I tried to communicate with him, but his words remained nonsensical, as if he were possessed by an invisible force. I decided to call the police to come deal with the situation, as the man clearly needed help. I stepped out into the hallway and made the call. When I re-entered the apartment to see what the stranger was doing, he was no longer there. He had disappeared. There was no trace of him in the room. The mysterious disappearance left me dumbfounded. The police arrived, and we searched the place, but found nothing anywhere in the building. The following nights became even stranger. On several occasions, I found evidence of the vagrant's presence. Objects piled up in strange patterns, inexplicable symbols drawn on the walls, and more incomprehensible murmurs. Every time I tried to approach, the man disappeared without a trace. One night, while patrolling in the basement, I heard a lament coming from an abandoned room. The voice was recognizable. It was the vagrant's. I approached stealthily and saw him standing by an old fireplace, his hands extended toward the flames that he had somehow lit before my arrival. His eyes were fixed on the flames, and his voice continued to murmur incomprehensible words. I asked his name, but his answer made me uncomfortable. He said his name was Nefarious, and that he was in search of something lost, something that could free his soul from eternal torment. His words were a torrent of madness, and his presence became increasingly unsettling. That night, I finally called the police, but when they arrived, despite keeping the vagrant under surveillance, he had managed again to disappear. Don't ask me how it happened. but it was practically as if I had lost track of time. And suddenly, he was gone. They told me they couldn't do anything without concrete evidence that he posed a danger. However, I knew there was something sinister and supernatural about that man. The vagrant's appearances continued, and his behavior became even stranger and more terrifying. Among other things, on one occasion, I found a circle of black candles on the floor, surrounded by mysterious symbols. Finally, one day, I found a note in one of the abandoned rooms. It was filled with scribbles and symbols, but I was able to decipher one word: release. Then I understood that I would never hear anything else about that old soul in pain, and I felt a shiver down my spine. In the coming weeks, what I expected was confirmed, and I never saw the mysterious vagrant again after that night, but his presence and his inexplicable actions left an indelible mark on my mind. Story 2. My name is Tobias, and the story I have to tell is the reason why I quit my job and swore never to set foot in that place again. The apartment building, El Alderan, had been the scene of rumors about paranormal events for decades, but nothing had prepared me for the night when I faced the true evil that lurked inside. It was a moonless night, and the darkness enveloping the building was oppressive. The rain fell intermittently, creating an ominous atmosphere in the surroundings. My surveillance round had become monotonous until I reached the third floor, where apartment 307 was located. From outside, I could hear whispering voices and the sound of a drum. The door of the apartment was ajar, and a dim red light filtered from inside. Cautiously, I entered the apartment and was horrified by what I found. In the center of the room, a group of people dressed in black robes stood in the middle, local of a circle. In the center of the circle, an altar was adorned with candles, dark symbols, and an ancient book with yellowed pages. The people were chanting unintelligible chants in a strange language as they held flaming torches. In the midst of the ceremony, a man and a woman were tied to an improvised cross, their eyes filled with terror. Both seemed to be in a trance, while the cultists surrounded them. The scene was terrifying and surreal. I grabbed my walkie-talkie to call the police, but before I could do so, a cultist saw me from the slightly open door. His eyes met mine, and a sinister smile spread across his face. That's when I realized I was in danger. The cultists were real, and they wouldn't hesitate to hurt me if I betrayed them. I quietly retreated and hid in the darkness of the hallway, trying to find a way to escape the building and alert the authorities. The voices and chants in the apartment echoed in my head, filling me with fear. Finally, I found an opportunity to escape while the cultists were engrossed in their ritual. Once outside, I called the police and informed them of what I had witnessed. As I waited for their arrival, I looked toward the building and shuddered to see a dark figure in one of the windows, staring at me intently. I couldn't see their face, but their gaze was intense and threatening. The police arrived and raided apartment 307. They found the cultists and rescued the man and woman tied to the cross. They were arrested, and the ancient book used in the ritual was confiscated as evidence. As the authorities investigated the cultists, I was informed that they had discovered that the group was involved in devil worship practices and had been performing sinister rituals at El Alderan for some time. It was said that they had lured vulnerable people to join their cult, and the rescued couple had been victims of a series of physical and psychological abuses. The El Alderan apartment building was finally closed and evacuated due to the cult's activities. Although the nightmare was over, the memory of that night and the threatening look in the building's window continued to haunt me. I could never understand how real people could be drawn into such a dark and evil cult, or how they had remained hidden in such a well-known place. The experience left a scar on my mind that will never heal, and confirmed that real evil and devil worship can be much closer than we might imagine.